So there's a theory that the rich and the elite are addicted to this chemical, and they can only get it. By the way, I don't know why they couldn't get the epi. That stuff's out there all over the place, although you don't see it sold on the black market that I could see, that I could tell. I had 2 cases in the past month. I got 2 people getting, as a matter of fact, what's today's date? I got 2 people being sentenced on drug charges. Okay, the one guy had GHB, another guy producing meth. And these guys never heard of AdrenaChome, never heard of it. Worked on the Pete's Connection, big heroin smuggling case. The AdrenaChome never came up in that. He got an Epstein lawsuit. AdrenaChome doesn't come up in that. But it comes up on YouTube, and it comes up in these hysterical reports you see out there on Twitter and these characters in 4chan and all that kind of stuff. Now, a couple of names you see attached to this AdrenaChome. One is Charlie Sheen. And you may not realize this, but I was involved. I was the investigator in the lawsuit that Charlie Sheen sued against my client, Capri Anderson. Okay? We know people who lived at Charlie Sheen's house. Okay? People who lived at Charlie Sheen's house later on went to live at my client's house. A different client. So we're very familiar with what's going on with Charlie Sheen. Personally, I am familiar with some of the most intimate details of Charlie Sheen's life. A lot of people know what I'm talking about. Read between the lines. But I have this information. And there's no AdrenaChome comes up in this. So a lot of people who would think, here's the classic character, Charlie Sheen, who would be, obviously the guy's out there using drugs. We know what drugs he was using. We know what kind of... And by the way, too, I'm not saying he's innocent of any kind of sex with underage people. There is some very credible documentation. His ex-wife, Denise Richards, wrote a letter to Child Protective Services saying, hey, I can no longer be custody and guardian for these 2 boys because they are showing clear signs of being abused. Okay? He's never been convicted of abuse. He's never been arrested for it or anything like that. But his ex-wife says clear signs, who was taking care of his kids. They were not her biological kids. And she went out of her way to care for these kids. And she says, I can't have these kids in my home. She also made allegations of child porn on his cell phone, his computer, and stuff like that. And in court, sworn documents in court. So there's all that. I'm not saying Charlie Sheen's a good guy like people like Alex Jones say he's a good guy. Okay? I'm not that guy. All right? What I'm saying is there's no evidence that he's ever used a drug called AdrenaChome, okay, which is really a mythical drug that started in a movie and a book called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Now, the source of that book is Hunter S. Thompson, who has his own allegations against him. But what would motivate him to expose this drug to people and tell them that's the big, big top secret the elites are using? Just not out there. Doesn't exist. Another one people saying if you Google it, Google AdrenaChome, Johnny Depp. Oh, look at him. He's showing signs of AdrenaChome withdrawal. Not only are there experts on YouTube and Twitter and 4chan of what AdrenaChome is and who's using it and how they make it just out of their cold cloth out of their head, but they also know what the withdrawals signs look like. Well, okay. We just did a show here recently. We had a guest on our show. And Johnny Depp's attorney listened to the show, and he made some statements disparaging my guest, and because my guest worked as a private investigator in the lawsuit. What's her name? Is Heard, against Johnny Depp there. So he's very familiar. This guy went looking for dirt on Johnny Depp. I know the dirt that he found. Not the work product for the lawsuit, but I'm familiar with the work he did. Anyway, and again, we're aware of the drugs being used, but no, not aware of anything about AdrenaChome. Again, it's not out there. So it seems like the further away you get from the reality and the people involved in these stories, that's where you start to hear these hysterical things, that are just taken as fact by people on the internet, and these chat rooms and these message boards and stuff like that. But the further away you get, the less real it is. I've been played some repeats in the past couple of weeks of Abe and Ella, the Hempstead couple, who made these wild accusations years ago about the Papa eats babies. They put their children on his stepchildren, her children. He was just a boyfriend. And I had him on my show, and I looked into this case, and I was disturbed by some things they were saying, by their attitude. They wanted to talk about marijuana. and how that cures things or whatever, and you got your kids, you lost custody of your kids. At the time, I was fighting for custody of my kids, so I was very sympathetic with them. I tried to help them, but they didn't seem too concerned about that. And then he confessed to me on the air about hitting these children in the head with a metal spoon, and I says, well, you've been in jail, you've been in prison, you're a knock around kind of guy, you can't handle these little kids. He goes, no, I was in fear of these kids. So it didn't seem like they had the kids' best interests at heart. And then we had some experiences with them off the air, and I reported all that to you, and you can just listen to that and make your own conclusions, without this hysteria, and stalking and harassment and going by the people who are consumed and obsessed with that case. So there's that as well. Now, I tell you about these things, because I believe I'm an advocate for victims, okay, especially in this area. There's a congressional hearings going on right now. You don't see much about it, but it's about the abuses that go on in these detention centers, where these immigrants are coming looking for help, and they're being held in these detention centers, right? And, well, what is this? It's very hard for me to see because my contact lens situation still hasn't been cleared up. But it's, what is this? What's the number on here? Oh, boy. 4,556 sexual abuse complaints were reported to the Office of Refugee Settlement. And it's really not even well documented. Are these cases of these children being abused by are the children? Some of them we know for a fact. I think like 178 of them were people. 178 cases reported to the Justice Department. Adult caregivers at the U.S. facilities were reported to have sexually abused migrant minors. So that's the fact. See, and how things like to get twisted away is this bizarre theory that came up. Here you see little children being held in cages, right? And I'm not saying this is all Trump, because it was Obama who created those cages. Obama was abusing these children as equally as the Trump administration is right now. And people would say, well, Trump's trying to rescue these kids from child traffickers. And that's why he's stopping this immigration at the border and holding them in these cages where they're being molested by the guards and by other detainees and stuff like that. And we've had a 16-year-old boy just recently died from the flu in there. Heartbreaking case. I talked about it when I had the flu because I could really sympathize. I was so sick with the flu. My daughter just had the flu. And here's a 16-year-old young man. Beautiful kid, handsome guy. Strong kid. Just trekked, right? Across these borders out there, walking, making his way across the border. He had to be in good shape and catches the flu inside the detention center and succumbs to the flu. Dies. So I cannot accept this theory that Trump is holding these kids in these cages where they're being sexually abused in these cages, in these detention centers, because he's trying to save them. Okay, I think it's the exact opposite. So we also have and it's all part of a bigger picture. Okay? So many people will say that, well, Ed, I'm with you as far as advocating for children, but I don't agree with your politics. Ed, I don't agree with your politics. Most of you don't understand what my politics are. You have some kind of imaginary feeling they're going on. But I'm with you as far as advocating for these children. But at the same time, the same person will say, Ed, I agree with you. I'm a child advocate as well. But we need to close down these borders. And it works. You block up these kids in these cages. It's a deterrent to keep them from crossing these borders. So they're willing to accept that, I guess, because the people in those cages have a different color skin than yourself. And because you somehow think that, well, the powers that be can be so heartless and cruel to cage these kids, but they're not going to do it to you. Because in this case, now you're suddenly on the side of this powers that be. Okay? Like you identify with the people that are oppressing you. You can see them oppressing these kids in these cages. We know that they're molesting our kids in the case of Jeffrey Epstein and his rich, powerful friends. So we see, but in this case, well, no. In this instance, they're trying to help me by keeping these foreigners out of the country. And they're doing a good deed there, because they want to help me with my job and keep my jobs and stuff like that. Somehow, everything else they do to us is to oppress us and fine us and jail us. We got more people in jail and prison in this country than any other country on the face of the earth. But in this one case, every now and then they're doing something to help us. Okay, this is one of those things they're doing to help us. Okay, we got more people in jail in this country than anywhere else. But that's for our own good, because they're protecting us from the criminals, the bad guys. I want you to stop and think. Is there any service out there that the government provides for us that does any good for us? Stuff like motor vehicle. Do they give a damn about how long we wait in the motor vehicle department? How much they tax us for this, they charge us for that, and you're sitting there for 6 hours? Of course not. And it's not just the government. Okay, it's private business too as well. It's capitalism is the problem. Okay, I was supposed to move to Florida. Let me look at the time here. I was supposed to move to Florida. I was supposed to move to Florida this week. All right, but we had a lot of things come up. One thing that came up was I lost my contact lens. I have to wear these hard. I tell you that whole story about the miracle contacts and magical thinking. You can Google that and listen to the story about my hard contact lenses that I have to wear because I have a keratocoma and I have astigmatism, and I need custom-made contact lenses. They're not cheap. Okay. And I went through this whole rigmarole trying to use my insurance to get it. I couldn't get it done in time. I snuck through police barricades. There was a big standoff. I snuck through there to get to the eye doctor, and they couldn't do it for me in time. And then I ordered them through. So I paid $900, $950 to get this contact lenses. And by the way, they're still not right. I got to go back Monday morning for a second fitting and a second thing. So I couldn't get my contacts done in time in order to get this move. I'm trying to move to Florida to take care of my old man. Right. And one of the reasons why is because the medical system in this country is a for-profit capitalist medical system. The medical industry does not care about you and me. What does it really cost to make these contacts? 50 cents, $1, $25, but we got to pay $900 for it. You got to wait online at the doctor for days and days and days. You got to go to. My daughter caught the flu. We had to spend the whole day at the doctor's to get a prescription for her for the flu, and then they screwed that up. They sent it to the wrong pharmacy. I had to drive around in the rain. All this stuff. Every single thing in our life today is so much more difficult and time-consuming than it was even 10, 15 years ago. Forget when I was in my 20s. Forget it, man. Life was so much. You can go into the bank. You can negotiate with people. But now it's all the personal touch is taken out of everything. I'll give you another example. We actually went and rented a U-Haul for this move. I was supposed to move the first of the month. Okay? And again, this took all day long. To rent a freaking U-Haul took all day long. We'll just take a commercial break and we'll get back and I'll tell you about that. And I'll tell you about a life hack too. Okay? If you ever need to rent a car, you got an emergency, you don't own a car, whatever, you got an emergency, you need to rent a car. And I tell you, well, you can't rent a car unless you have auto insurance and you have a credit card. Or a debit card, at least. Some places will take a debit card. But did you know you can walk into any moving rental and buy a moving van? Rent a moving van with no credit card and no insurance. Says rent it to you for $50, $75. So if you ever really desperately need a car, you got to get someplace. You can always rent a moving van. Or they even got those moving pickup trucks. You can go to U-Haul and rent one of those. And we'll be right back after these messages with more of the Opperman Report. And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and